Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Cory. I'm your host, Cory Smith, here to discuss some NC State football on this beautiful afternoon. Well, not so beautiful, actually. It's pretty cloudy. It's been a rough couple mornings. It's been really tough to get to get things going early in the morning for some reason. Been trying to put together some content each and every single morning, but haven't been able to shoot these. Shot it late on Monday with Michael. Shot it. Didn't do one yesterday, but we're back with another one today. It's 1:00. Apologize for the late start, late coffee, but wanted to jump into things. NC State tomorrow. We'll have. I don't know if I said basketball or football at the beginning. That's how off my days are. But we're talking football. NC State, when it comes to the transfer portal, will resume visits tomorrow. The rest of the country will also resume visits tomorrow. You've had a couple of days off for the coaches' meetings, coaches getting the opportunity to go travel and do those types of things, and then we'll come back to host visits. It's interesting because on Thursday they will host visitors the last day to actually enter the transfer portal. Now you have a couple of days to still be able to take players, but we'll go over why some of these deadlines are important and why it's major for NC State to try to get all these guys in. But the big thing for NC State is going to be the fact that they're going to have multiple visitors on campus tomorrow. Michael actually posted both of those just a little bit ago, so you can go check that out over on packpower247.com. But NC State will be hosting a linebacker. We'll also be hosting a defensive lineman. And when I'm looking on the defensive side of the football, like those are the two biggest priorities left. Linebacker position, obviously you lose a guy in Caden Fordham, but also Kenny Soares Jr. leaving the program. He's heading to Michigan State. You have a big need there. The thought process was, Kenny Soares Jr. would probably be one of the guys to compete for a starting spot next year. I don't know that he necessarily would have been the starter next year, but you really, at this point at linebacker, only have, A.J. Richardson returning. There's a couple others that were productive this past year and could be high upside guys, but you don't really have a ton of proven players there. Sterling Dixon, a young guy that could potentially push for that spot. You've got a couple others that, like I said, you have some depth there, but you don't really have a surefire starter. And NC State going out there looking right now, getting a Big Ten transfer coming on campus. Happen to be from Penn State. I'll just kind of give that that lead to people that are. I know we right once we post one of those stories, there's always people ferociously trying to figure out who we're talking about instead of actually paying the $10 per month to jump on. We'd really appreciate if you guys would just do that instead. 50% off right now. Get you 6 months absolutely free, so it comes out to $5 per month. If you still sign up right now, I believe until January 16th is the deadline. So make sure that you check that out and make it a little bit easier for you to be, an insider out there. So you can share that information if you want to, whatever. At this point, it gets out there eventually, but we're trying to get the information to just our subscribers as quickly as possible. So again, linebacker, a major position of need for NC State. They've tried to host multiple, haven't ended up getting anybody really to this point. Harvey Dyson, I would put in that category. I think more of an edge rusher, but you don't really have that, that Caden Fordham type, that Kenny Soares type of linebacker. Go back to, you don't have a Peyton Wilson. You don't have, Drake Thomas. You don't have that traditional linebacker for NC State that you absolutely need. You need somebody that's going to be good in coverage. You need somebody that's going to be able to get after the quarterback, but also somebody that can stop the run. And right now, all you've done so far is add guys that are more of pass rushing type edges or linebackers. And Sterling Dixon kind of fits in that category too. You do not have, a traditional linebacker that you really need in the middle of this defense. And then defensive line is another one right now. I think defensive line, you've addressed some needs. I think Harvey Dyson, again, could be a stand-up defensive end, could also play linebacker position for you at the jack position, bandit, whatever you want to call them going into next year. But you don't have, I like what you get back with, Isaiah Shirley. I like what you get back with Chase Bond. He's, gotten better I like what you get back in Josiah Victor. I think he's probably your starting nose tackle next year, but you don't have any depth to push those guys really outside of, some young players coming in, maybe an AJ Prim if he kind of, develops into that type of guy. But you really don't have anybody right now to me that is going to, with experience, have veteran experience, really push these guys. And I think there's a lot of players out there that they could potentially still try to bring on campus and still try to address that need. They're bringing in a JUCO defensive lineman. They've already added another JUCO defensive lineman earlier in the cycle. You've got a few in this recruiting class that you feel like could compete for those minutes, but you don't have anybody right now with a veteran presence coming into that room that really pushes the rest of those guys like the younger guys that you have. Again, I love Chase Bond. I love what he's brought to you so far. I love what you got in Josiah Victor this past year. Could potentially be that guy to be the starting nose tackle, but you just don't have a ton of experience there. And I think, again, going back to what we said at linebacker, you really need to be able to go out and get some of those guys and try to add to that room. Moving over to the offensive side of the football, the needs still right now, you've hosted a lot of different guys at the tight end position. But if you're looking for needs right now, I would say you still need somebody to replace Justin Jolie. You got Hunter Provience that I think kind of replaces what you had in Cody Hardy. More of a run blocking defensive lineman, tight end at that position, somebody that can really help you to be able to and can has caught the ball out of the backfield, has proven to do that a little bit at Montana State before he came over to NC State, but you don't really have a true move tight end. They've hosted a few others. Noah Myers is one that they've targeted. Gavin Harris from New Mexico State was one that they brought in, but he, is still since taken visits, is planning to go to South Carolina later this week. It's going to be tough to be able to bring him in. And then Myers is another one that I think, if NC State kind of brings him in, he has a chance to be somebody that could really help them. 32 receptions this past year, 357 yards, 3 touchdowns. So could he take a step up in production with a better offense? Potentially. But if you're looking for absolute needs, like the move tight end position right now is missing for NC State. As far as, again, a veteran presence, could a guy like Preston Douglas step up there? Maybe. Could a Gus Ritchie become that guy? Sure. But you don't have anybody that's proven. Dante Daniels, if he's able to return, could all, again, all those guys could help. But you don't have anybody that you're like, all right, that's our guy. That's our Justin Jolie from last year. And that's become a vital part of this offense that you're missing right now. I'd also throw in wide receiver there too. I mean, wide receiver, you've gotten a couple. And you like what you've gotten so far. Victor Snow, potentially there. You like what you got in, Chance Robinson. And maybe some other wide receivers, on the depth chart could start moving up. Teddy Hoffman getting a bigger role. There's the potential for several other guys that you have, but you're still lacking, a guy that you're like, all right, that's that again, similar to tight end. Like that's wide receiver 1 next year. And I don't know who that guy is right now. Could Keenan Jackson step up and become, a bigger part of this team? Sure. Could some other guys, eventually become bigger role players for NC State? Yeah. Again, they all have the potential to do that. But I haven't seen it to this point, and you don't really know exactly what you have in that wide receiver room. So there's still a lot of potential there for NC State, but you need somebody that you're like, all right, that's the guy going into next year. And I don't know that you have that on the roster just yet. The other position, look, I still feel like you potentially need to add an offensive guard. Those are wants more so than anything. More so than, I don't think you have a need at either one of those positions. But here's the kicker for NC State is, after losing Lex Thomas, which again, I don't think Lex Thomas was ever going to be the answer at quarterback. No shot at Lex Thomas, but I just think there was too many limitations there for him to ever be the guy. I still feel like there's a need at backup quarterback for NC State right now, or for at least a third string, behind Will Wilson. The issue going into that is the fact that, are you able to sell anybody on that? Are you able to sell somebody on, that being a need and that being a role for somebody going into next year? I don't know that you necessarily are able to sell a quarterback on that. You think back to a few years ago, Jack Chambers, coming over from Charleston Southern, he wasn't great. I'm not saying that that should be the aim is to go out there and try to add somebody like that, but you think back to that, like break in case of emergency type of quarterback. Do you really have that in Will Wilson? I like Will Wilson, but he hasn't developed as a passer to this point, at least at the college level. Can he develop there in the spring? Does NC State kind of roll the dice and say, all right, we're gonna bank on having CJ Bailey as the only true experienced quarterback on the entire roster going into next year? Do you get a little creative? Is there a chance to bring somebody in as a walk-on at the quarterback position? And be able to, still give them, kind of an NIL package to be able to bring them in that they weren't getting at a previous stop, an SCS quarterback or, something along those lines. There's the potential for that, but it feels like you still need to add depth at that quarterback position. So that would be my other major need going into this, is trying to find something to address that going into this next season. But as Matt pointed out here, he said, what would you say is the biggest or the strongest part of the team outside of quarterback? As far as the offense is concerned right now, I would probably still say right now your offensive line, I think, is probably the biggest strength. When you're looking at what you potentially bring back this upcoming season, you're bringing back a guy in Spike Souls that you love at the center position. You're bringing back a guy in Teague Anderson that can he slide over to the left tackle position, I think is probably a big strength for NC State, having those veteran bodies. But it's going to change a lot during spring practice. It's going to change a lot during fall camp. We'll find out a lot more about, hey, can Chance Robinson actually take that next step for NC State at the wide receiver position? How good is Victor Snow once he gets NC State? How good is a guy like Jonathan Paylor after coming, was really pushing for potential RB2 or RB3 duties and, a big playmaker when it comes to the return team for NC State. And also, how good is a guy like Davion Gauss that comes over from UNC? Could the running back position actually develop into a really big strength for NC State going into this upcoming year? And then as far as really on the defensive side of the football, it's hard to gauge. If I'm looking at a strength on the defensive side of the football, I like where NC State now is at the safety position, bringing over a guy like King Mack to add to guys that you have coming back from last year. Really like what you got from Tristan Teasdale this past season. Also, when a guy like Brody Barnhart, Ronnie Royal III, when they get back on the field, when they develop a little bit more, how big of a strength could that safety position be for NC State? Do some of those guys move to nickel potentially to add to what you have in Jackson Vick at the nickel position that I think was good, not great this past season? You really need some depth there. So I really like what you have on the back end of this secondary so far, but there really needs to be more strengths along this defensive front for NC State to be able to see them develop. So that's kind of where I am right now. Again, I'd love to have Michael come on and kind of give his thoughts on that next week after NC State finalizes things. The last thing I'm going to add here too, before we get back to that, because I did have a question about this, the fact that January 12th was the first day of classes, that's why it was important to get as many guys as you could, on this past week. But also January 20th is the last day to add without permission from an instructor. And then January 26th happens to be the official enrollment date. So that all those dates are important to keep into the scope here, because while you can add guys and they can come in during summer courses, whether it's the JUCO level or it's the high school level, or potentially guys that could enter the transfer portal, and I'd keep an eye on a couple of those too, from the national championship game. They still have a January 20th to 24th window after the national championship game. There might be one or two that NC State tries to aim for, whether it's coming from Indiana or Miami. You already have one coming over from Miami and Chance Robinson. NC State's had a lot of success out of the state of, or out of Miami here recently, out of the state of Florida, but in particular out of Miami. So there might be a player there to keep your eye on. We'll see. But All those dates are extremely important. January 26th being extremely important because while all these players can still enter the portal, and by the 16th, and then they still have, more time to try to find their home. If you want to get in during spring practice, you want to get a leg up and you want to get started, you have to be enrolled by January 26th. So that's going to be extremely important for NC State and for programs across the country to try to get these things finalized before that date so that you can get them in during spring practice. So that would be another date I would keep an eye on. Obviously, there's a lot of different dates that are going to be changing over the next few weeks, and trying to keep an eye on all those. But hopefully this was informative. I appreciate everybody for jumping on. We'll have much more content on baseball, also basketball later this week, and then we'll have plenty of content on the website. Like I said, if you haven't already checked it out, Michael Clark has the 2 visitors that NC State will have on campus on Thursday, getting things started, trying to to fix some of those needs that NC State still has. They'll also be hosting a few others over the weekend. We'll have all of that in the days to come. Thank you to everybody for listening. We will talk to you again soon.